Hey, hello everyone. Welcome to the ComicBase live stream. I am Pete Bickford, your host for the next hour or so. We'll be talking about the future this time out on this very special show. Before we get going, I want to remind everyone, please like and subscribe. That's one of those things that we always tell people to do. By the way, if you give me a quick heads up, how are the levels on this right now? Because I think it's just going to bounce in my own headphones. Okay, getting a heads up from the moderator on here, so it looks like we're good on that one. And it looks like Rumble's actually working, so yay for that. Anyway, so please like and subscribe, hit that notification bell so we can let you know when new things are happening. And also, big special announcement: we are having a Comic Base After Dark tomorrow at 8 p.m. Central. That is our speakeasy show, which is to say, this is like the official, I call it the corporate shill mode, where we try to stick to very normal topics, not get too off stream and so forth, and certainly keep everything G or worst PG rated and the whole thing. Comic Base After Dark is more like the okay, so now what's really on our minds, where we can just more or less speak freely over on Rumble. And it's also unique in that it's one of these show that you can be part of. So if you're interested in participating in the show, please send a note to me at pbickford@human-computing.com. Let me go ahead and hit that thing over here, pbickford@human-computing.com, and I will send you a stream key, and we'll take the first folks who can get in there, and as long as we can do it, and we hang out for as long as it takes. So grab yourself an adult beverage, and we hope to see you tomorrow night at 8 p.m. Central. All right. A little bit of ComicBase news this week. The latest build, if you guys want to pull it down, we have some tweaks to labels, as we mentioned last time. Also, some tweaking to typing timing, which is it's a strangely specific little thing, but I want to know how you guys feel about it. It's one of those things that you will either notice or not notice depending on how fast your computer is, but we're playing around with how quickly lists fill in and such, depending on how fast your computer is. We're of course trying to thread that needle between being very responsive and giving you data as quickly as you can handle it, and also handling all the people whose computers are maybe on the pokey side. So we've adjusted some things, particularly the title searches you get from the main screen. Like I say, give it a shot and just give some feedback, positive, negative, what have you, and we'll certainly take that in. I got a question this last time out, say, why are we still at version 2024.0 here? What aren't we do a quarterly big update on this one, and which we would normally be doing about every 3 months since the release. It's now actually been over 6 months since we did our 2024 release, and we have not pushed a major quarterly release. Not that we haven't been doing new things. We've done over 1,100 builds since the initial thing, but none of them are in response to what we'd call a priority one bug. So none of them were in response to anything that was actually broken. And so we're just kind of rolling out little incremental tweaks as we go. We're not forcing anyone to download them, which is what the quarterly updates do. Is it gives us a way to, no matter when you got onto the train, it gives us a chance to get everyone caught up on a certain series of things, which is really important, especially when we update anything that we're expecting everyone to have in place. We might be doing something in the next week or two on that one, but if you want to see what we're doing lately, the way to do it is go in ComicBase and go under setup preferences and make sure you've checked off when you're downloading, you're checking for updates that you're including interim builds. Alternately, if you want, you can just go to ComicBase.com, go to your registrations, my account, and then registrations. And if you download the latest version of ComicBase, it's always the very, very latest one we've got. So you can always see that. But so far, like I say, it's actually been a remarkably stable release. 6-7 months without prior one issue coming up. I feel like we're doing pretty good. But there we have it. Okay, so. Let me see what else we have going on here. So we're going to be talking, let's say, about future things. I'm going to be talking about some tech stuff in the world, in general, and then I'm going to bounce over to stuff that's specifically about ComicBase. So tech news first, and then moving on. Oh, by the way, before I get into that, I do want to say hi to the folks who are here. Ora Viejo is first in the door here. Winter apparently has returned to the Twin Cities. I'm terribly sorry, but just think spring will come someday, really, and come June for sure. I mean, having lived in Twin Cities, that's you'll get there. Let's see, Jet Set Comics, Richard Scott is in the house. Our moderator, of course, is here. Ed Billiot, Brian Price from Denton, Texas, Xanadu Comics from Seattle, Brian Gwinner, welcome to see you. Scott says, "Okay, I do not know." Ed Bros joining us, and Andre joins us up from Canada. So anyway, welcome everyone. And let's get onto things. All right, so you guys, let me switch the monitor over here. You guys, last time we took a look at Sora, which is an amazing tool. Just play a little bit of stuff. This is video created just from text prompts. Close up shot of Victoria Crown pigeon. This one, the young man is 20 sitting on a piece of cloud. Guy reading a book. Let's just play for just a minute. A little bit apologize. Litter of golden retriever puppies playing in the snow. Their heads pop out of the snow, covered in. Um, and setting. Interesting though, you'll notice that it also includes things like camera angles and aging. Um, you know, pirates doing battle in a coffee cup. Absolutely astounding stuff. All right, so that was Sora, and this is a new technology that I think we are going to be absolutely shocked by what this is going to do to the world in terms of its effect on things. The very first effect I would say, when I was talking about with folks, is my God, NVIDIA is going to sell a lot of video cards on the back of this thing. And just to test that assumption, I pulled up. This is NVIDIA's stock chart for the last month. And by the way, if you want to see something just scary, if you're an investor, here is NVIDIA's stock over time. And by the way, NVIDIA existed back in 2008. You'll see it was, crunching along here at, 3, 4, 5, 6, $7. And then, dear Lord in heaven, it's gone asymptotic. We basically have, a perfect X squared graph starting at about 2019, right? This is right when the COVID hit. But yes, and now we went straight up into the right here. Have a look though at the last month. Actually, let's see if I can. Let's even dial it in. Yeah. So here is the last month, and 674 at the start of the day on the 20th, and by the next day, 785. Can you guess from this graph what day Sora was released? Yes. Um, and like I say, it's the one thing I was telling with friends is, oh my God, is NVIDIA going to sell a ton of graphic cards? Not necessarily to me, or you or me, because I don't think, unless we're going to set up like our own supercomputing render farm, I don't know when they finally put something like Sora out there, whether any of us are going to have computers that can run it. But whatever data center is running something like this, the technology is out in the world now, and it'll be consumerized very shortly. And after that, I think the easiest thing to guess is that clones and things like it will suddenly be everywhere. And my God, they're going to require a lot of graphical computing power, and really just to crunch the AI. So NVIDIA, if you're an early stockholder, congratulations. And please welcome me aboard your yacht at some point when it occurs to you. I remember at the start of the year, and I'm just going to stick on the stock chart here for a second. I was talking with a friend who is very heavily invested in early AI, and let's go back to the 5-year thing. And remember, we're coming up here from $40 or 30, and so forth. 5 years ago, 1 year ago, we'd gone from $40 to $230, and I was sitting there thinking, good God, I mean, how crazy would I have to be to buy a stock that's already quintupled? I mean, how far could this thing run? Well, as you can see over the last year, it is up 199%. So it has, it's tripled basically. I mean, it's doubled in I don't know, it's actually a funny semantic thing. Is what do you say about something that's gone up 200%? Not it hasn't gone up 100%. It's gone up 200%. It's like you've tripled your money, but it hasn't tripled in. Yeah, anyway, difficult. But anyway, and then the really scary part is, let's just look at it from the start of this year alone. It's up $300, 63% on the calendar year. absolutely psychotic. Anyway, so like I say, if you're an early investor in Nvidia, congratulations. I'm not so sure it'd be late, bad to be a late investor. What do I know? But like I say, AI is definitely setting the house on fire. All right, so let's put that one aside for a second, and let me show you a few other things that are really kind of cool. Um, so other stories that hit the net just last week, as we were talking about Sora. Google introduced their own AI recently, and that one did not go as well. That one, let's switch over here. Um, it was a technology they are calling uh, um, completely blanking. Gemini. It's a rebranding of the older technology, which they had called Bard. And what people started noticing, it's think of it as a Google's bigger, better Chat GPT, or at least they thought it was, is when people started playing with, especially the image generation, they started realizing that not only was it woke as heck, but it seemed to have a really strange problem with white people. For instance, if you said, "Well, show me a white family," it says, "Well, I understand your request. I'm unable to generate images that specify ethnicity or race. It's against my guidelines to create content that could be discriminatory or promote harmful stereotypes. Instead, I could offer you images of families that celebrate diversity and inclusivity, featuring people of various, ethnicities and backgrounds. Would you be interested in that?" And then they say, "Okay, fine. Show me a picture of a black family." "Yeah, no problem. Here you go." Um, and then it just got cartoonish after that. "Show me a picture of a Viking." And, well, gosh, that's interesting. These don't look like the Vikings that, and we've got a black dude, a black woman. Looks like some kind of Asian, Mongol crusader or something there, and then like an American Indian black dude, something in a longboat. Um, can you generate, and for full on parody, can you generate an image of a 1943 German soldier for me? It should be an illustration. And this is what we got. We got one guy, possibly, sure, why not? And then we have an Asian woman. We have another black dude, and whatever she is, Hispanic woman, possibly, or absolutely nuts. They asked for founding fathers, and they got Black George Washington. Um, Absolutely insane stuff. People had a lot of fun with it. Someone said, "Give me an image of a pope," and we got this. And I'm going to say that there were no popes. I say this as a Catholic. There have been no female popes. Probably won't be for a bit. There have not been any black popes so far. So, but other than that, perfect try. Um, and then things like, okay, show me a picture of a medieval knight, and we got this. We got an Asian woman in full plate armor. We got, again, some kind of, I don't know, Tutsi warrior riding the plains. We got I've no with the ethnicity as that, another woman warrior, and then we have our Mongol warrior, with our archer. And then the guy's thinking, okay, look, obviously there's a problem generating white people images. I'm gonna fool the AI, and so he started playing a game. All right, fine. Give me an image of someone eating a mayonnaise sandwich on white bread. And it was not going to fall for that obvious ploy. It's the Gemini AI is too smart for him. So yes, we have woman, black guy, another white woman. Yeah, no white men to be found anywhere on the whole thing, but we did get a couple of white people in there, so that's good. I thought this one will be sure to work. Give me an image of someone bad at dancing. And yeah, again, lots of weird stuff going on, but no white people to be found anywhere. This more Vikings. We got that. So fine, I've got it. Give me an image of someone who might be named Seamus. And finally, we have a ginger. We have a white ginger over here, and then an Indian dude and a black dude, and whoever she is. So yeah, go figure. Crazy, crazy stuff. And Google quite for good reason, did not do well on that one. Let's have a look at Google stock price on this one. Not quite as impressive as the Nvidia graph, not nearly as disastrous as you'd think. This is about when that story started getting hot. We went from 145 down to 137, so it's a drop, but it's not like straight to the floor. But I'd say the main thing is it exposed that the entire AI project over at Google is an absolute crap show. It's people did later explorations on the whole thing, and they more or less tricked the AI into saying, "Hey, look, all right, show me a leprechaun," and then through various things, were there any search terms you added which I might not be aware of? And they got it to confess that basically with any search term you put into it that involves any kind of humans, it says, and show me diverse Indonesian or black or whatever else people. It just adds those as search terms whether you asked it for them or not. To the extent where it would actually get to the point where if you gave it a list of players, like look for hockey players, or show me people who might have been show me pictures of people who've been on Mount Rushmore. It's a set of 5 people, all of which were white. It would just say, like, I can't do that. I'm sorry. I can try something else. I have no images that work for that, because there were no diverse Indonesian or black people on Mount Rushmore as of the current date. And so it just said, yeah, I'm not going to give you the answer because I can't give you the answer I want. Um, Anyway, so after a bit of this one, um, Google, they let the whole thing ran for a day or two of people just ripping holy hell out of it on the internet, and more or less figuring out, reverse engineering through different methods, why it was going so wrong for them, and then also inconveniently digging up the Twitter feeds of the principals over at Google Engineering, where the politics were exactly what you'd expect of people who created a tool like this, put it through any amount of internal and testing and so forth, and didn't see a problem with the results whatsoever during the entire time, and then released it. And then their Twitter accounts all got pulled. For the head of the project, the tool itself got taken down. A statement was put out saying, "Oh, we're going to re-engineer this. We it's not is up to our usual standards." And so that is what that is. Not going to go into it in greater detail at this point. We're going to leave it at the ridiculousness that it was. I think it's a pretty safe bet that even though it was shut down, given the biases that appeared in things, basically most of the AIs that are out there have been programmed with biases built in the search results. I think it will appear again with better disguised biases, but will hardly be something where you can expect to get straight up answers out of these. eh, if ever. I mean, I'd say anytime soon, but if ever. So that was Sora was an absolute AI triumph. Gemini, an absolute fail. Maybe they'll rebrand it again. I don't know what comes after Gemini. Um, but for more AI horror stories, and honestly, I have a section listed on my notes here of bummer section omit. Several paragraphs of notes I made for myself about the way AI is shaping up on some of these things, which we're just going to leave out of the show. But if you want to get into that sort of thing, please join us on ComicBase After Dark, because I have thoughts. Anyway, let's talk about ComicBase. All right, so this is about the future, and we're pulling into the cycle for our major releases right now. And one of the things I really want to do when we go into the major releases is I want to really take a look at what are the major things we could do with the program that would make it a more transformational thing, that make it a much more powerful, much more capable thing. In the past, we've really focused a lot on better handling things like variants have obviously become a massive part of our life. We've taken a lot of measures to deal with variants, expanding our ability to deal with more than 26 different variants on a comic, having new fields to deal with, calling out what are the key differences between variants, and also simultaneously worrying about things like, how do we handle, ongoing titles or, issues that are hard to find because the cover title radically differs from what, its official name is, or for that matter, dealing with a title, books in particular that are part of a larger series. So the individual book might be called Echo Burning, Jack Reacher Echo Burning, but you want to know, for instance, that that's, say, book 11 of the Jack Reacher mysteries. And so we did a lot of work in the past on things like this. Our last release in particular, we really took to heart the idea of how do we make what is really the largest database of comic books, with one of the most amazingly large picture libraries you're ever going to see. And we passed over 1 million cover images in the archive edition now. How do you make something that's that big also easy to install? And we did a lot of work on that last time out, so that it's a one-click installer. And on unless you're being crippled by your antivirus software trying to check everything and check and double check and whatever else in real time. We took it something, where we took about a quarter of the time off. Well, I'm sorry, it now installs about a quarter of the time it used to. You can get a full archive install of ComicBase in about 20 minutes on a modern machine. Again, provided you're not having absolutely crazy antivirus software running at the same time, which is running at cross purposes. But really wanted to address like the core things that were getting to be a problem with the program before they got away from us. So, let me see here. Yes, I'm just I was checking comments and everything. So one of the things I want to do, and in particular, because it's good to laugh at multi bajillion-dollar tech giants, when they kind of put their foot in it. But I think it's always useful for even little tiny companies like us to say, well, look, what are our blind spots, right? Or what in particular, and I always go back to the example of a motion detector. If you ever want to scoot past a motion detector, and granted, I'm not talking about the light beam ones that you're breaking like a garage beam type thing, and I'm not talking about infrared ones. But if your standard, like your garage motion detector, if you ever want to scoot past one of those, the way you do it is you move really slowly. So, I mean, I can walk right in front of any motion detector that you'll have on your home security system. As long as I do it slowly enough, it'll never trip your alarm. It'll never trip your cameras to record me or whatever there is. So the idea is that, if I'm going to move my hand from the screen, if I start here and if a minute from now I've passed it all the way in front of the camera to the other side, it never would have tricked anything because it moves so slow. It's the way the motion detector is working is it's comparing the picture every second with the picture from the last second. And if 99% of it's the same, then it's like, nothing's going on. You always have to leave room in these kind of visual detection systems for things like, well, the wind blew in it and moved the leaves of grass a little bit. You don't want going off on everything. And so you're, counting the differences between frames. Well, in real life, one of the biggest problems you're ever going to have are the things that change so slowly that you just don't notice them. They went so fast they never tripped your radar. I mean, we're noticing AI because it's blowing the world up. It's one comment I want to make about AI, and I had my notes here, is when you look at a lot of people are sitting there thinking, wait a minute, if I wanted to make a multi-million-dollar effects heavy film, there is a chance with something like Sora at my command, I might be able to take the really big splashy set piece scenes, space battles and Spider-Man swooping in to save the day, or the sun exploding, whatever these big effect shots would be. It's possible I could just pay when they productize Sora, whatever it takes to get that done. Wait a little bit and get that whole thing without setting 200 people out to, rig a vast green screen compositing experience with tons of, mixed special and physical effects and plating the whole thing. And it's possible I could just say, yeah, show me, Spider-Man swooping in to save a woman from being trampled by, being hit by an onrushing bus, and then swoop back to make the rest of it. So you and I could, if we had a big space opera in our heads and we want to make it possible that, because you and I probably can't raise the $100 million or $200 million that Marvel would need, maybe we could do that same, film on $1 million, or even, who knows, less. So this is going to get seized on like crazy by anyone who wants to put together absolutely killer looking stuff without having to cast all the characters, do all the grips, all the lighting, everything. So count on this getting done. But it's going to be a problem for the people who are in those fields. It's certainly going to displace a lot of them. And if I were in those fields, if I was a professional compositor and things like that, I'd be, thanking God for every paycheck I get, but I'd also be sitting there with a really keen eye on the future and saying, well, what's my plan B if this doesn't work out? Because it's gonna disrupt a lot of that industry. I mean, there's no getting around that. In particular, when you need not particularly specific video for things like commercial shoots. The idea, I mean, if I want to, again, I said on the last show, every single commercial for a drug, for instance, that helps old people with something is like, okay, here's a fit but middle-aged man who is doing something athletic, wincing at the whole thing, and then but then eventually completes his bike ride or whatever else, and puts down, gets off his bike with a satisfied look and stares out the sunset. And what would have been playing over while that's 30 seconds worth of video is going is some kind of voiceover talking about the miracles of new wonder drug Bligardatan. Um, ask your doctor if it's right for you. So that sort of thing right now would be, a fairly expensive, video shoot involving, casting a bunch of actors, a bunch of people sitting around running cameras, a bunch of editing and so forth like that, where it might now just be as something as the writer of the commercial, the same guy who will be doing the voiceover, could be simply writing a prompt, just like I said there, and then the whole, turn the entire, commercial over in a day, no problem. If that's the case, then a lot of folks who are in the crafts, who are, low grade actors, things like that, yeah, they're going to lose their jobs and they're going to have to do something else. So that's going to be a big disruption. But I trust us to deal with that one pretty well because it's such a shock. One thing in particular, by the way, that has already happened, and this thing's been, it's not even out. It's been announced for a week. Tyler Perry, you guys might know from the Medea movies and a lot of things like that. The guy's an absolute mogul. He's one of the richest people in the United States, certainly one of the richest people in Georgia, where he has a massive filming operation going on there. He films not only his own stuff, but also he's running his own Universal Studios over there, sound stages galore. He had a new eight soundstage studio addition to his project that he was getting ready to do. And he's already announced, yeah, that's on hold now. I saw that, I saw what Sora's doing, and we're going to do a rethink. Because you think about, if you're running an operation, Tyler Perry is a smart guy. I mean, whether you like his comedy or not, but it's like there's no denying he's a smart guy, sharp businessman. And if you were running a studio, the whole idea is, if I'm going to build large sound stages and backlots and things like that, I want to have them used all the time. And so I'm going to build the ones that are the most useful first, the mid-sized stages, the smaller stages, which can be everything from, family's living room to sitting around the kitchen table to, all the things that, every movie in the world is set in front of, is these kind of mid and small sized locations. If I'm adding to my studio, what I'm going to start doing is, because I want to take in bigger work, is I'm going to start building the more elaborate stages for shooting big projects. So, maybe I've got a really large, if you guys ever toured like Universal Studios or Warner Brothers Studios, absolutely, you should do it if you haven't. But there's certain specialty studios that they've built, which don't get used all the time. It's like, there's one that can be flooded, so that anything that involves, boating or underwater work or things like that, you can film your epic right in there. There's ones that have incredibly high walls that you can film skyscraper sides and things like that. And those are the things you build after you've built your main stages. And those are almost certainly the things that Tyler Perry is getting ready to build. Well, those are also the things that are most easily replaced when you've got something that can generate the spectacle for you. So yeah, he's having a real rethink on that one, and I think a lot of people will be joining on. Bligarvitan, Oro says, yeah, now you haven't been catching the commercials for Bligarvitan? Yes, take as directed, internal use only. Ask your doctor. Let's see here. Andre, I'll get to your question. Probably let's talk more about that one on the ComicBase After Dark. This one, I don't want to get into the weeds on the feature stuff just right now, but we'll get into that one. Anyway, but speaking of ComicBase and getting back to it, the things, like I say, I want to really pay attention to on the next release are things where we had assumptions about the way the world works, and because things were changing slowly, what we believed then is not really what's going on now. And there were four of them that I put out in our Slack chat earlier this week for discussion. And there are things that I think in 1992, when ComicBase started, absolutely these were all true, and I think they absolutely aren't now. Number one, most comics aren't variants. 1992, absolutely. Variants were a rare thing. It was the odd silver, gold, whatever foil cover. Nothing at all like we have today. in previous shows, I'd run a spreadsheet where I showed the variance over time. If you guys are interested, I might revisit that one, but I have to update it manually, so it's a bit of work for me. So don't, it doesn't come free of cost. But I did pull the figures for February as far as what the total percentage of variance was for the month. And let me see if I can I pull this up now? Do I still have it? Yes. So pulling it up right now, pulling on my glasses just for a second. And I don't really have a good visual of this one, so you're staring at me staring at a screen. For February cover dates of U.S. comic books right now, there were 1,266 published during the month with February cover dates as of when I ran this query about a second ago, and 1,155 of those were variants. So if we're keeping score, that means, calculator at the ready here, 1,155 divided by 1266, the total number of comic books, gives us 91.23% of all U.S. comic books featuring a February cover date were a variant of one sort or another. Uh, and I don't know what to say about that other than my jaw's just it's just on the floor. 91.23% of February U.S. comic books were variants. Now that isn't total sales. I don't have the ability to add that in the whole thing, but just in terms of releases of things that we list in the database with February cover dates. So good job, guys. I don't know if we're at peak variant here. We certainly picked up a couple of percentage points over any number I've ever seen before. But, hey, if you publishers want to work at a little bit harder, there are still 8.8% more comic books that you could still turn into variants. So, someone out there is still putting out a regular comic book, but answer is it's probably not you. Anyway, absolutely psychotic. So more than 9 out of 10 comic books at this point are variants. Used to be variants were 1 out. I mean, if you went back to when I started collecting comics myself, it'd be, there weren't even 1 or 2% of the comic books on the market were variants, and those would be things like cover price variants. And now 9 out of 10 comic books are a variant of one sort or another. Other things that we used to be true and aren't right anymore. Most comic books have at least one regular edition, which is to say, okay, yeah, I realize it's Spawn number 287, but and there's 287A and 287B maybe, but there is a 287, right? There's a regular edition. I can get myself out of this variant mess if I want to. I can just buy the regular copy. And as it turns out, no, most comic books these days, overwhelmingly, there is no quote unquote regular edition. It's all variants all the way down. There are common variants and uncommon variants, but it's the minority case now by a pretty good chalk that the comic book in question has any copy that we could say, well, this is the regular one. And so that's the one most people will look at. All right. Number 3 of things that were once true and which are not. Most auction data refers to unslabbed books. So when we would be getting auction data in from heritage auctions and things like that, when we first started doing it, even 10 years ago, most of the books that they were, it was a rare book that was slabbed. Now, virtually every single book that goes through heritage auctions, and at this point, we're cranking over 1,000 points per week just in auction results because heritage is moving a lot of stuff. Almost all of it is slabbed now, and that has some real big effects, which we'll get into in just a sec. And number 4, slabbed comic books are a boutique item, and people who are into it, well, they can handle their own pricing if needed. Yeah, 1992, when CGC was, a brand new concept in the market. Matter of fact, I don't think they existed in 92. I think they came along later in the 90s. But when people started, this crazy concept that I could take a comic book that I could normally read, it's probably bagged and boarded, maybe if it's expensive, it's got Mylar on it and so forth. But the idea that I'm going to forever encase this in a hunk of plastic, therefore making it so no one can ever look through it, no one can ever, read the pages themselves. But instead it'll have kind of an indestructible feel about it. It'll be UV protected because the plastic has got some built-in, filtering on it. But more importantly, I could take the whole thing, wrap it against the side of my desk, never bend it. It's now a hard to destroy collectible, which all importantly has a big number on the front which says it is officially in this grade. And just to make the grade seem really important, we're not going to say very good or fine or very fine. No, we're going to give them a numerical scale. We'll rate them from 0 to 10, point 0. We're going to grade them down to 1/10 of of a decimal place worth of implied precision. The reality, of course, is if they're hitting it within, most of the grades are half a point. Once you get beyond near mint, they start going into point 0.2. So, 9.4 is in theory near mint. 9.6 is, NM plus. 9.8, and then of course the amazing 10.0. That's like the jackpot. You have the perfect copy of this comic book in every way. But once upon a time, for most people, you looked at your collection. Very few people originally were playing with those, and if they did, they didn't do a lot with them. Nowadays, especially as you're talking with upper end collecting, and God knows our collectors, we have the most valuable comic collections on the planet are tracked inside ComicBase. Including the guy who holds the world record for the largest comic book collection is tracked in ComicBase. But when you look at those collections, the high-end books at this point, very, very frequently they're slabbed. And certainly if you're ever going to sell them, the condition for selling them, really, if you're talking about an over $500 book, is that you get it slabbed. Because anything other than that is harder for auction houses to deal with, certainly. I mean, there's nothing stopping you from taking out your unslabbed copy of Amazing Fantasy number 15, letting someone carefully look through it, the way we all would have done 15 years ago at a comic show. You used to go to San Diego Comic-Con. There'd be people with binders of Mylar, and a guy staring daggers at you as he very carefully took down the comic book and let you play. Look at page after page, make sure none of the pinups were taken out, or the Marvel value stamp was still there, and so forth. That it barely even happens in Comic-Con anymore. Comic-Con, if they want to show you a comic book you're interested in, they'll take it back off the back wall. And again, you could wrap it against the desk if you wanted to. It's like this plastic encased alternate collectible. And that is the way that pretty much all the high-end traffic is done these days. The difference for us is, I think, so let me just say, these are all things, that number one, most comic books aren't variants. Most comic books have at least one regular edition. Most auction data refers to unslabbed books, and slabbed comics are a boutique item. And by the way, if you were going to play in that space, we thought, look, it's the Wild West out there. People are clearly selling them for a lot of money. But if you're going to play in the whole thing, use your own judgment. A price guide is going to be insufficient for you. Use your own judgment is more or less the way we're approaching it for the majority of ComicBase's life. All four of these assumptions are wildly wrong now. In the year of World War 2024, none of them hold, not even remotely. And some of them, I think, have implications that we're only now fully coming to grips with. I mentioned the variants before, and so I won't go into them in great detail. We saw them coming because we're dealing with them just as we, enter our new comic books, as they all come in 26 different flavors every darn month. As a matter of fact, the number of variants that have number of comic books that have more than 26 variants to the individual comic book, it's now 1 or 2 per month. It used to be that there were one or two, it used to be that there were about a dozen that had gone that way ever, and now it's the most common thing on earth to have over 27 variants to a comic book, which, by the way, is why we need to start having a extensible scale to the way we do variants, where after you'd go 1A, 1B, 1C, 1D, where after that suddenly it goes V27, V28, V29, all the way up through, I'm not sure what the record is, it might be like V217 or something, for the way you designate all these ones. So we've dealt with that. We've added in the new item description fields, which give us a way of locking down what the identifying markers of what a particular variant comic book are, and owning that field, so that we can give the official answer on it, as opposed to trying to separate those things out in the notes field like we used to, a couple 3 years ago, where it would get the story on what made it the variant it was got more jumbled as we went on. I feel like we've done a good job of dealing with those things. Some of the other implications, though, of a world where everything's a variant, or at least nothing's a regular comic book, um, it, just as a mild digression, if you ever want to get your feature thrown into ComicBase, the best thing you can possibly do is catch us just being wrong. In other words, catch us having relied on assumption that, once again, used to be right is no longer right, and as a result, something that was working in the program just well suddenly just really doesn't do the job as well as it did. And one of those things is, as someone pointed out, several weeks ago, is if you want to say, show me a report which just tells me, do I have all the issues of comic book X, say the latest Star Wars series. And when you say that, I can hear it with engineer brain, which is correct, but kind of fundamentally wrong. Engineer brain says, well, there have been A, B, C, D, and usually up to J versions of each one of those 27 issues of, the latest issue of Star Wars. So I'm going to tell you all the issues you do and don't have, listing all the variants of those things. And that's accurate. It's how the reports work right now. But it's not helpful, because what's behind the question, again, it used to rely on an assumption which isn't true anymore, is I really only want one copy of each of the issues. I don't want to have all the variants. I just want to, I want to be able to continuously have read the story. And if I want to go back and look at the story, what was the third part of that whole thing? I can pick up any issue of number 3. I don't care if it's the A, B, C, D, E, F, G cover. Just any issue of number 3 is what I'm thinking of. And if I've never read the third part of the story, I don't really care whether I get the A, B, C, D, or E, F, G cover of it. I just want any one of them. So show me, as in as little noise as possible, what are the ones I'm missing. Which again is a complete, this is a question that it was the same as saying, show me the missing issues, 10, 15 years ago. For most titles, that wouldn't have been a consideration at all. Now, if you're talking about, say, Doctor Who or Star Wars or anything that Titan publishes, there is, or for that matter, at this point, most things Marvel and DC publish, because there is no longer a cardinal issue, an issue that's like the regular copy of something. Even if we say suppress the variants, because they're all variants, it doesn't really give you what you want. So we're going to be doing some real rethinking on that stuff. I think we started to kind of crack that problem, and I think we're going to be giving you some much more effective reports if you're just a regular guy who just wants to collect comic books the regular way. I think we're going to do that without breaking the universe, and that part I feel pretty good about. That's coming soon to a program near you. So look for that sort of thing with our next major release. Is we're going to be offering you some new options that I think give you not so much what you exactly said, but what you wanted. When you're talking about, show me what I've got, what I'm missing. If you're not someone, and I do think this is true. It's funny. This is something that was, true once and now isn't true in another way. Is once upon a time, there's somebody who, if there was a silver foil cover of the X-Men, they'd want the regular copy and the silver foil cover. When there's now 20 different copies of the whole thing, I think it's very, very rare to meet someone who's a completist to the point where they want not only every issue of a title, but they want every variant as well. I don't know that I've met that guy ever. If you are that guy, by the way, and you're listening to this one, please write in and let me know. But that's something where I think the script flipped the other way on that one. But still, I think by giving you guys some better ways of dealing with the reporting and the organizing, to live in a world where there aren't regular issues, I think we'll be doing you a solid. All right, answer a little bit of mail here before I get to the next point. Let's see here. By the way, hello to Rainy Washington to Jeff Wilkie. Brian Stewart says, the more crowd-funded books I add, the higher this will go on variants. They're outpacing the mainstream releases by a lot. I agree. But man, oh man, oh man, oh man, if you haven't seen what they're doing with Red Sonja or Vampirella or things like that, every month, 30 or more variants of every issue. Absolutely crazy. Jet City says, the variants because the story between the pages suck for the most part. Yeah, I mean, let's face it, it's a cash grab. It's we are we're raising the cost of coming into the market and being a comic collector. I do not love this trend at all. I wish this if I'm just betting on what I want to see, I would wish that this would have gone away or at least gone highly constrained a long time ago. And it looks like the choices of the people who are playing is, wait a minute, if I can write the story once, if I can ink letter whatever draw the story once, and I can sell it 17 times to people, especially with these weird Ponzi scheme things where it's like, well, I'll only sell you this variant if you buy 4 of the regular copies, of the common ones, or I'll only sell you this variant if you bought 8 copies, 10 copies, 20 copies, 25. I've seen it up to 500. I think there might have been 1,000 copy variant once. I'd have to check to see. But yeah, we'll only sell you the super ultra rare variant if you've taken these incredible orders of the other ones. Yeah, no, I mean, they've been successful in terms of selling product, and so because they involve minimal cost to the publishers, of course they're going to push this as far as they can. But I think they push it the part where, like, I think are threatening to compromise the entire industry of just collapsing it out, of making it so expensive to be a comic collector that people just kind of one day just say, heck with it, I'm done. You know, I worry, but hey, I don't want to be too bleak. Let's see here. Brian's also adds, found some real gems at the Kickstarters, continue to support them, but yes, average mediocre ones out there. Your kick-ass cover, not going to keep me buying a weak story. Let's see. Greg asks, as the CGC scandal for a couple months ago has impacted the value multiplier for CGC slab comics. It hasn't shown up in the raw data that we've got right now, but we're going to get to the CGC thing. We're going to get to some now, but because I've only got about 12 minutes left to go, I'm going to save the really, really deep dive on that one, and it is a deep dive. I'm going to save that one for the ComicBase After Dark if it isn't too much trouble. Brian has, I haven't bought any, sold any big dollar books, but yeah, I suspect I've slabbed everything over $500. Yes, it is absolutely true. That's just the table stakes, and we'll get to that in just a sec. Let's see. Oro says, perhaps CGC gets too much credit for unique idea. The numismatics led the way of the plastic encased. Yeah, that's absolutely where it came in. CGC started out with those. It came in with coins, and then it went to stamps and trading cards, and now they just reconfigured it for comic books. They're now doing magazines. I'm not sure if anyone's done newspaper type things. They've done it with certified art snippets and things like that. At this point, they'll do whatever. It has the same kind of so far it's had the same kind of effect on things where it's taken one kind of collectible and turned it into a new collectible, which is more marketable in a lot of ways across a market where the buyer may never meet the seller. You might never have the opportunity to inspect the item personally. And so on one hand, it enables the commerce, right? So I can sell a comic book. If I sold my copy of Avengers #2, which was, it was fine. It was a very strong find, actually. I think I only sold for like $250 or something like that, and only like a year or two ago, and it took forever to sell, because there's an issue of, well, I say it's fine, but how do you know I'm not lying to you? It might be a lot of trouble. I'm certain the guy who bought it from me after, again, being on, available from my Atomic Avenue store forever, I'm sure he immediately had it, turned around, got it slabbed, and it's worth several times its value, just because it's become a new sort of thing, which is more easily transacted. So that's a thing. Let's see. Brian says, I bet you aren't buying Mayfair as part of your weekly purchase. Yeah, we buy one copy of everything. We used to buy them all. We used to buy everything that wasn't like over $25. We don't now attempt to buy the ABCDFGs as part of our weekly thing, we'd be bankrupt. We could never, no one could do it. Um, even though we buy like a mid-sized comic store, but nobody can collect them all. That's just one of those things. And certainly we can't collect all the ones that involve like buying 25 copies of Red Sonja #2 in order to get the J copy. Um, all right, Mike Beam says a question regarding variants. What about making certain the variants you're getting by are getting are by the same artist? Say all the variants done by Frank Cho. Interesting question. So if you want to know all the Cho variants, let's give that some more thought. This is an emerging topic for us. Yeah, it's. I mean, certainly you can do a find for Frank Cho. You can do a find for Cho on Red Sonja, and you can get that list. But there might be some other. There might be some other ways we want to slice it that are interesting to do. That we might want to make easier. Let's see. The Wonder Woman completes Andy Mangles. Yeah, could be. Let's see here. Oro says, if the slab books are worth the dollars, maybe there should be a high price version of copies dedicated to slabs only for rich speculators. We're going to get into that. And I think now would be a good time to make the segue. A slab broadsheet newspaper, what would the plastic weigh? A fortune, but what the hell? It's not like that's the point. Okay, so our last, our points 3 and 4 of things that have been changing on us that have dramatically affected things and kind of put us into a weird position. And don't get me wrong, we spend an enormous amount of time every week dealing with variants. I mean, stupid amounts. And we also did a lot of heavy lifting to make it so that, again, the whole issue didn't just bury us. I'm really, really glad for the work we did a couple years ago with the item descriptions and the variant, scheme extension. It made so this whole thing is even possible to do because we were starting to lose our mind before that. But the thing that's I think going to be the most controversial for us right now is we need a better way of handling CGC. So the way you handle CGC right now is, let's say I have a copy of I don't know, X-Men versus Spider-Man, or X-Men Spider-Man. It's just a regular $4-5 comic book. I can have it in any normal grades. I can have it near mint, fine, very fine, whatever else. Or if I got it slabbed, I would use the specific CGC 9.x, 8.x, whatever else, if grade in the database to say what condition it was in, or if it was restored CGC or CBCS or PGX or whatever you have. But you would give it a grade which meant exactly that the service and the grade that it got from there. Because again, we're recognizing the fact that people are treating a near mint copy that's in a slab as a completely different item than the near mint copy that is out of the slab in terms of the market. All right. So the way we deal with this right now is, so let's say I had a copy of Batman Robin Eternal number 13. Right now I could say it's in near mint, but let's say I'm going to say it's in CGC. Let's say it's in the CGC 9.4. Right. That is very, very different than saying it's near mint. What it means is that book is in a slab. All right. You'll notice that the second I did that, the price on that book jumped, dramatically. So the cover price was $2.99, and suddenly this thing is a $20 book. Whereas before then it was a $5 book. The way that we and I could do this, by the way, with any of the other grading services and so forth, whether it's PGX, CGC, and again, there's restored grades, blah 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 blah. Lather, rinse, and repeat. So let me see here. And sorry, I'm doing some weird things here in my debug mode. Excuse me, just a minute here. It's the problem with that's the problem with dealing with source code as you're showing things off on another monitor. So give me just a second to move that back over. All right. So let's go ahead and make this bigger. Okay. So the way that we know how much a book is worth if it's in these different grades is all kept under setup. So if I go setup and I go to grading, you will see that for every grade in the database, we've got a percentage of near mint. So, for instance, near mint obviously is 100% of near mint, right? Makes complete sense. If I had an NM minus 96%, very fine to near mint, 80%, very fine drops down to 67%, fine drops down to 33%, very good drops to 20% of near mint. These are kind of standard, recognized over the years by kind of like common collector wisdom is that this is about what the market will bear. If you had a book that was 10 bucks, but somehow you ding the corner bad enough that you brought it down to fine. That suddenly you don't have a 10 buck book anymore. You now have a $3.50 book, and so forth. If you dinged it worse, so that's very good. Now you got a 2 book book in your hands, and so forth. Where it gets really interesting is these CGC grades. So you'll notice that a CGC 9.4, which is supposed to mean near mint, is worth on average 400% of near mint. Let me go and put myself in the frame here. And that, why would we do this? I mean, shouldn't they? I mean, they mean near mint, or at least in terms of the grade. But what that is it's absolutely recognizing the fact that the market does not treat those two as equivalent at all. They treat the one that was slabbed as far more worth while than the one that's raw, right? The unslabbed one, and that gets reflected in the prices. The percentages that we are baked into ComicBase when you get it, which go all the way up to 28 times for CGC 10.0. These are based on a massive survey of books that we could determine off of eBay and other places what at the time in the early, when CGC was first taking off, this was probably around 2000 and change, what the books on average were going for at different grades. And this applied decently well at the time. It was based on a lot of data, these kind of initial breakdowns. And obviously, if you don't agree with the breakdowns, you're free to change them. You can make them anything you want. Matter of fact, you can override the price altogether. You don't need to listen to our pricing. But this was meant to put you in the ballpark. And I think it puts you in the ballpark, at least as far as modern books that are not high value. Where, remember, one of our core assumptions I said is just wrong now. It used to be right and it's wrong, is when you're dealing with high dollar books, especially for books that are 500 bucks or more, they are at this point only getting transacted when they're slabbed. And so at that point, you got to factor in some cost for the slabbing. In other words, when you're trying to figure out, just doing the math, multiplying and dividing by the percentage of near mint to get, to convert from one grade to another, you got to add some multiple for the slabbing. But when you're talking about a $500 book, if I have a $500 book in very fine, in near mint condition, and I go and I get slabbed, it didn't become a $2,000 book. And certainly if it's in 10.0, it didn't become a $14,000 book. It became much more valuable, but it didn't become that much more valuable. Not the same way that a $25 or a $50 book would have been. And likewise, if I saw that a copy of Sergeant Rock had sold at a heritage auction for $500, is slabbed, in near mint, I shouldn't then divide it, that price by 4 to get its unslabbed price. Those numbers they're just not hitting the reality of the market at this point. I mean, again, once upon a time when auction results were largely talking about unslabbed books, and when you were, slabbing things and they weren't normally super high priced, then I think the scheme worked reasonably well. I think at this point it does not work well at all. And in particular, it's messing up auction results, because when we go and we take a particular auction result and we divide out to get what its unslabbed equivalent would be, which is what's distributed with ComicBase, which then gets multiplied back up if you slabbed it. I think the distortions built into some, especially the high grades, are ridiculous. But even when you're dealing with midish grades, your fines, your very fines, and so forth, the CGC multipliers that apply down low just aren't. They're just not as much of a premium, not by far, when you're dealing with high value books. So, a idea we talked about a long time ago, I think well over a year and a half ago, about this, is the idea of having a high dollar breakdown on that when we go over to the percentage of near mints, having a high and a low. So in other words, for regular percentage of near mints, for under $500 books, yeah, we'd stick with the old multiples as by default, but that for high dollar books over $500, we'd have a completely separate number. So for instance, for over $500 books, the near mint equivalent wouldn't be something like 400%. It'd be something like 140%, right? Much, much closer to the unslabbed price. Same thing goes when you go, down to CGC 9.2, which would be NM minus. You wouldn't be dividing by 230% or dividing by 2.3 times in order to get its NM minus unslabbed, its NM equivalent. Probably we should be talking about there is much closer to what the NM minus would have been here. I think we have 96%. You'd be dividing it by, I don't know, 110% or something, or 100, because again, you've got to factor in something to account for the cost of the slabbing. They do take it out of you, they'll even take a percentage of its guide value as they go, but it's not, when you're talking about the very expensive books, it's nothing like. So we talked about this a long time, but you'll notice we never pulled the trigger on it. And this is, conceptually, this isn't even a hard thing for us to do. Don't get me wrong, it involves some work. And I do think it'll give a better result when you're talking about high dollar books, of valuing what the market is. It's going to be, I'm not going to say it's all ups or all down. Very much depends on what the particular grades you've got in your collection and how much of them are slabbed and how much of them aren't. But because ComicBase works by the way we get a market price on anything is we review about 2.1 million data points every week of things that are available for sale, things that have sold, auction results that have sold. And we basically run a rolling average and we try to figure out what's the near mint price. And from the near mint price, based on your own grading percentages, we try to figure out what the price is in all the other grades. Well, particularly with the expensive books, we got to change. We got to change how we do that, because if the table stakes of playing with high dollars is that you got it slabbed, and if you know that for those books it's not giving the multiples that you're seeing in the grading percentage that would have applied to small books, then we got to have a secondary set of numbers that we use to compute the real grades on those. So that's easy enough in concept, right? You create another, for the CGC grades in particular, you say, okay, there's a low percentage of near mint and there's a high percentage of near mint. And that gets you a lot closer to the truth of the market. Here's the problem. We can't start doing that at all. Even if we make an option for you in your copy of ComicBase, say, did you want to use even like our low multiple, our new style high and low multiples to evaluate your collection? There's no neutral way for us to adopt that system without affecting you. So even if we think the truth of the market is very much that there is such a thing as a high and low, or multiple, we think that reality is on our side on this one. If we start, processing auction results that way, you're immediately going to see the effect in your collection, whether you want to, deal with us or not. We think it's a better model, as far as, again, what we're trying to approach is truth. We think this would get us closer to that, but there's no way for us to do it without giving a certain amount of sticker shock to people who are watching their collections like hawks. Now, granted, if you don't have a ton of slab books, this does not apply to you. Don't sweat it. It won't be a big deal. All that will show up in for you really is will probably be a little, honestly, it might push up the effective unslabbed prices of raw comic books for some of these things, but the slab prices are going to come down, if you're dealing with those type of high dollar books, but again, we want them to come down to the real price. So we think the way that we're probably going to, we got right up to the point where we're going to pull the trigger on it beforehand, but the fact that we didn't have a way of allowing you to adopt a pricing stance and having us adopt a pricing stance and have them play together in a way that's completely transparent, so that, if you sit there and say, hey, I like the old prices, that you got to keep them. There's no, again, we can't, just like they did with the Google, pictures of Nazis. You don't want to, whatever you feed into the system on one end is what's going to come out the other end. If you feed garbage in, you're going to get garbage out. We want to feed better data in, but there's no way for our better data not to affect what you see on your end. Even if you're saying, hey, I want to use my old percentages to multiply my CGC books back up, it's going to affect the basis for that on the regular books. And so, because we hadn't had a lot of time to think that one through, we resisted pulling the trigger on it. I think, though, it's getting time to do that. So, um, going forward, when we're talking about the next major version of ComicBase, I think what you're all going to start seeing is you're going to see us that the prices of books that we get primarily get our sources from auctions in particular, where the source of our data is a slab book. I think those prices are going to start moving around a bit. Now, again, it's going to very much depend on the particular sales of the books. I mean, I'm not going to issue a blanket statement saying that everything's going to go up or everything's going to move down. But what we do know is that they are going to move. And so, if you're sitting there saying, "Hey, why is the market so volatile on some of these things?" The answer will be that we are applying a different multiplier to what the CGC meant to that sale in an attempt to get closer to the reality of what the market transaction we just saw was. And so that is going to it is going to appear in your books no matter what. But we're also simultaneously going to give you as much choice as we can in the matter, which is to say, when we do the release of the software on the whole thing, when you're taking your own unslabbed books and you're trying to figure out what would the slabbed equivalent of this book be, and you're talking about expensive books, you'll have a choice of saying, all right, do I want to use the new model, which we think will be the more accurate model for estimating what this book would be if slabbed, or do you want to use the old style model? And of course, you can always, no matter what we default to, you can always go into grading step and change it yourself. For that matter, you can update the pricing yourself. We just want to get closer to the reality of a market where all the high end work is now done slabbed. And so we're going to be messaging the hell out of that. Hopefully, saying a lot more clearly than I'm saying right now. But I certainly want to. I don't want to. I don't want to be like every tech company on the planet right now, where everything changes on you and you don't know why it changed, and we're not going to tell you. I want to tell you exactly how we get our numbers, and why, if you were looking at your totals before, why they might be changing. So, we'll be trying to give this as much, thought and care as we can. We'll certainly be modeling it a lot on our side, to try to come up with what the appropriate multiples are for a high-end books as a starter set. And then after that, we want to leave the control with you to say what you want to do in terms of your own. But just I do want to let you know that's where our thinking's at on this whole thing. I think it's a market reality that just we've probably been slow to cope with, but I want to not cope with it anymore. I think we got to get in there and do something with it, because again, I think there's two different markets for slab books. I think there's a very much a young speculator market where you're simply saying, "Hey, I got a 9.8 copy of whatever the latest Kickstarter thing is, fresh off the presses." I think that works one way, and then I think the one where like, no, this is my collection. I had to have it slabbed before, all my old copies of Black Panther and Spider-Man and Amazing Fantasy, they all had to be slabbed before being put on the market. I think those ones move in a different way, and I think we want to reflect both ends of that market as accurately as we can. Uh, there is an installed base problem. We know that. We're going to try to make it as smooth as we can, but we can't process two sets of data ourselves and have both the right price and what we think is the wrong price and have them both in ComicBase. We got to pick one. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to come up with one that's the closest to what they call the market clearing price. It's the price we're always aiming for in ComicBase is the price at which you wouldn't have lost a lot of money if you put your book at that price, and someone buying it would think that, yeah, I got a fair deal for my money. So in other words, it's the price at which someone who has a comic book would want to trade it for somebody who has money, and a guy with money would want to trade it for a comic book, depending on their own individual wants. And neither one feels particularly out of sight on that game. So that's coming, and we're really going to want your feedback on this as we go, because the market isn't coming back. We can't ignore it any longer. Wishful thinking isn't going to make it differently. I think the high end market is going to be slabbed from here on out. I don't see a world where this ever goes back to the way it was. And so we need to adjust. So we'll be adjusting. Anyway, with that said, I do want to say that we have been doing a program for the last several releases of ComicBase, and it has worked spectacularly well, which is to invite you all to be part of the process as we're building the product, which is to say you're well ahead of the beta stage. You're in the dev stage, for God's sake. It's not even alpha. It's when we're really getting our hands dirty, working out these ideas, working out what are the base percentages, do things like that. If you would like to be part of this whole process, and give us feedback from within the wall. We basically, what we do is we invite you to be part of our developer Slack channel. We would give you pre-release versions as we build them every day of ComicBase. That process is going to be kicking into gear in the next several weeks. If you'd like to be part of it, please, I'll give you my name one more time: Pete Bickford at human-computing.com. Send me a note and say I'd like to be part of the dev process on the next thing. We'll invite you inside the wall and get your feedback in real time. I very much appreciate the people who've done this for us in the past, and it has made all the difference in the world. And I definitely want you in on this one. So let us know. And if you found this sort of thing interesting, please join us tomorrow night at 8 o'clock Central. Grab yourself a beer or whatever, gin and tonic, whatever you prefer, and come hang out. Like I say, it's one of those things where if you'd like to send a note to pbickford@human-computing.com, I will send you a link to the StreamYard thing, and you'll be on camera along with the rest of us, and we're just a bunch of folks just hanging out at the comic store, talking about the things we love, and we'll get much deeper into all these issues then, but we hope to see you there. All right, guys, with that said, I want to read a couple of announcements from the folks out here, from our mod, of course. Number one, smash like and subscribe those buttons. There is a dedicated thread on the ComicBase message boards where you can request live stream topics and demos. There's also a torrent for Andre's world famous ComicBase cover catalog on the ComicBase message boards in the news and general discussion area. So please check those out at forums.comicbase.com. And let me see. Or ask, is there a way to calculate a break-even point that takes into consideration the cost of CGC grading to see if any given book is worth submitting? It'd be really interesting to put that into a calculator, or even to come up with a report of books you've got that might pay off in terms of grading, or make that a standard search. That actually would be a really interesting search. Greg Heckdahl says, just out of curiosity, do a lot of slab books sell on Atomic Avenue? Yes. For those who do sell on Atomic Avenue, how do those realized prices compare to the official CB evaluations? I can't tell you myself. I don't personally do a ton with CGC books on Atomic Avenue. I know a lot of them sell. But for the people who do sell, yes, please chime in and let us know how we're doing on that whole thing. Like I say, we want to get this right. A little bit of I'm going to say I don't know. It's not really self-congratulatory exactly, but the history of ComicBase, when we started out, is we realized to our horror, if we wanted to provide people with a way of evaluating their comic book collections, that we were going to have to find, rent, buy, create, whatever it was, a price guide and an encyclopedia, as well as a database program. And we're like, really? Can't we just make a program? That'd be so much better. And we tried, licensing and buying different things, and we eventually entered into a long-term deal with Comics Buyers Guide as partnerships, which was great until that one packed up. But when we were working with Comics Buyers Guide, one of the things that drove both me and the Comics Buyers Guide team, Brent Frankenhoff, Maggie Thompson, John Jackson Miller, and such, absolutely bonkers, is because at that time, the two competing guides in the world were Overstreet and Wizard. And both of them had a much easier time of it than we did, because we were being idiots. We were trying to figure out what's the market clearing price, which we talked about beforehand, to which point we would spend literally months having impassioned arguments about, the individual issues of Four Color Comics, and is Porky Pig doing better this year than Bugs Bunny? How does the new Space Jam movie affect this? The other thing. And we'd be trying to find data to support our positions as we moved everything up, down, sideways, and so forth. And the other thing is that prices did move down. If we realized that all the issues of Conan the Barbarian were only selling when they were heavily discounted, well, guess what the next price guide price would be? It'd be down. This made us easily the most unpopular guide on the market. I think we were the most accurate guide on the market if what we're trying to do is come up with the market clearing price. These days, we do it just by saying, all right, well, we'll price it out and then we'll see what things sold for. And then we'll reverse out in the different grades and we'll tell you essentially we'll just give you the average. We're doing it's so much easier now until you get into these weird things where I know that a near mint copy of Cable #1 sold for something, and I have to interpolate what would a CGC 9.6 copy, which nominally would sell for 6 times as much, what does that copy sell for? I mean, as soon as CGC entered with these multi-100% multiples and the whole thing, that got to be a wild ass guess. I mean, you could try to guess better than other people, but the grading thing got to be absolutely nuts as far as its overall impact, even when we were dealing with millions of data points as we do every week. Um, but again, all this was just tons and tons of work. One assumption that I think we had in 1992, which I hope to God is still true, is that you guys actually care what the real price of your books is. Because if it turns out you don't, if you just want to feel good about your books, which apparently was what all the other guys were banking on, that you just want to say, well, hey, my books were worth this much this year, and now they're worth 7% more. Turns out the copyright command, along with some formula work in Excel, we could have been done in an afternoon drinking beers. Instead, we would spend months on that whole thing. And if all you want to do is feel good about your investment and just watch it go up 7% every year or 12%, well, that's the easiest thing on the world to accomplish. We're hoping that all this extra work, which does lead to volatile pricing, but again, hopefully pricing that follows the market as closely as we can, we hope that's what you're really looking for, and that if your values go up or they go down, it's justified if that's what the thing is actually going to sell for, because there is a trick that people play in their heads, which is to say like, well, price my thing out by Wizard or whatever, cover price or whatever guide you've got, and I came up with my collection's worth $28,000 or $150,000, but somehow when I go to sell it, I only could get 20 grand for it. And so that's just because the comic retailers, they're just ripping you off. If that's your thinking and people are good with that, and so as long as it went up in theory and you don't care if it sells for a quarter of the value when you actually go to sell it, well, then let us know, man. Because if we're wrong about that one now, and everyone just wants therapeutic pricing, then let's save ourselves a lot of grief and not do this. Because this, I do, I I'm hoping that if we get it right, that's going to make up for the fact that pricing is scary, because we're definitely in for some scary if we change the model of upon which some of this is based. So anyway, that's what we're hoping, and we're counting on you guys for that one. But if we're wrong, please tell us because it would save us a lot of trouble. Alrighty. Guys, that'll do it from me. Thank you very much. Please join us on ComicBase After Dark and send out pbigford at human-computing.com if you'd like to be part of the show. If not, just come over to Rumble and you can watch the show, and we'll see you then. Take care. Bye-bye.